And here with me now is Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Speaker Emerita, I'm trying to remember if you ever went to the floor not knowing where the votes were.
No, I always say to my colleagues, now the Republicans in the leadership, don't bring a bill to the floor unless you know you have the votes. And in order to know you have the votes, you have to have some in your pocket. They keep talking about Al Green. We were surprised. I was surprised to see Hal Rogers there, my former chairman, in my respect, former chair of the Appropriations Committee. He came, well, you'd have to see the apparatus he had on after being in an automobile accident, but they brought him in for that. But for them to say that they did, you have to have your votes. Don't worry about the other side has. You have to have your votes. You know what is a majority. If you don't have that, don't bring it to the floor.
Well, when, there are a lot of memes and tweets mocking this law. I don't know if you watched Succession and if you were familiar with Succession, but a lot of it, people are playing when Shiv Roy, looks at her brothers and declares, boys, you're not good at this. So it brings to mind, how do men know how to count? But on a more serious note, the reason they didn't have their votes, and they have a slim majority, but the reason they didn't is the substance of the impeachment, because some of the conservative Republicans could not fathom impeaching someone over policy. I mean, you had Mike Gallagher, the Wisconsin Republican, who was the head of their China committee. I mean, he said it'll come back and they'll do it to us if you start impeaching someone over policy differences, not over high crimes and misdemeanors. Isn't that the fatal flaw in the impeachment attempt that they say they're going to try again against Alejandro Mayorkas?
Well, you bring up a good point about Mike Gallagher and what he said. What they're trying to do, understand this, everything they do is about Donald Trump. He's the puppeteer. Sadly, as I've always said, he's shining the light on the strings, and it looks terrible. Everything's about him. So what they're trying to do to Mayorkas, who is a distinguished public servant who has honored the law and the policy, executed the law, is they're trying to cheapen the commodity of what an impeachment is. They're trying to say, if we do him, then that makes it look like what we did to Trump was similar. No, it wasn't. Similar. Trump, high crimes and misdemeanors. And so when you're looking at, and this case on the immunity goes into this a little bit, when you're looking at impeachment, as you made the point, you don't impeach about policy disagreement, but high crimes and misdemeanors, administrative, execution. And so, again, they're trying to make it look, and Gallagher even wrote something in one of the papers saying, well, if they shouldn't have done Trump, that was frivolous. It wasn't frivolous. It was careful, and when he gave us no choice, we had to impeach the president.
And, I mean, Mitch McConnell, you've worked with him as well, even though it's the other house, the other party. He was passionate about Ukraine.
Yeah.
And Ukraine was in that border bill, which he had supported. So what happened there?
Well, that's the Senate. We'll see what happens today. I think Chuck is doing a great job of putting everybody...
But isn't that also Donald Trump behind the scenes?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about Donald Trump. It's all about Donald Trump. It's about immigration, all the rest. The president has cooperated in terms, as we have. As we see what's in the immigration bill, it's not a bill that was written, but it's compromise, it's negotiation, and it solves the problem. For a long time, the president has had this in his proposals. Now they have some more things they wanted. The president agreed. And now they didn't take yes for an answer. Mitch McConnell didn't take yes for an answer. In the beginning of the day yesterday, it was promising. Toward the end of the day, he said, it's changed. And that's because of Donald Trump.
You're a former intelligence chair. I mean, you have foreign policy credentials going back, being in the Gang of Eight forever. And you're going to the Munich Security Conference.
Yeah.
If Congress does not pass Ukraine aid, how do American lawmakers representing our government hold your heads up?
Yeah.
In Germany next week, when NATO came through with billions, but we have weapons that they don't have that Ukraine needs, the ATACMS and the air defenses. And Ukraine is without ammo, we're told, in the trenches. And Vladimir Putin has more people more men that can go into the fight because the casualties don't seem to bother him.
What's heartbreaking about this is that we've all praised the courage of the Ukrainian people fighting for their democracy, and in fighting for theirs, fighting for democracy writ large. We have overwhelming votes. We had over 300 the last vote we took in the House for the military assistance for Ukraine. The EU funding over $50 billion, a huge amount of money, much more than, it's a lot of money.
Right.
That's largely for the economy, functioning of government and the rest. The military assistance is what they need, and that's what our funding is. So it is a total embarrassment, but that's the least of it. It's a tragedy that we are not supporting Ukraine. Now, I'm not giving up on it. I do think that when the Speaker was asked today at his press conference what he would do if the Senate sent over the Ukraine package without immigration, and he didn't. He was non-committal on it. So I'm hoping that so many of the Republicans support aid to Ukraine. So many of them do in the House of Representatives. Now, they do have a pro-Putin caucus there, not officially a caucus, but advocates for who benefits from this? Vladimir Putin. Who benefits? Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump. It's connected.
Let me ask you about the politics of all of this, of course, because there's also Israel involved, and the president's support for Israel has really hurt him as the war has progressed, and there have been such tragedies, following the massacre, the hideous massacre of October 7th, but the humanitarian crisis, which is a catastrophe in Gaza, has inflamed the world. And so the president is badly hurting with young people, with Palestinians and Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, especially in battleground states like Michigan. The president's sending some aides there tomorrow to try to repair this damage. What can the U.S. say to Netanyahu about compromising and about getting more aid in and about reducing the number of troops that would not, damage Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas?
Well, the president of the United States has been a true loyal friend of Israel, because has been in our national interest, as many of us have. The humanitarian disaster on the ground in Gaza challenges our conscience. It's a terrible thing. And while October 7th was a horrible barrack thing as well, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing humanitarian assistance in Gaza. The president has had that in the proposal all along. The Republicans have held that up. Some of them never want to give any aid to Gaza. And they've told me that directly. But the fact is, conscience demands that we do so. So, again, it has to have clarity in all of this. The president has been advocating for humanitarian assistance to, it's like $1.5 billion immediately for Gaza. The Republicans won't let us take that up. So people have to know that, too. And the reason they're getting the assistance is because of the Republicans, not because of Joe Biden's sincere support for the state of Israel.
Does the president have to really pick up the pace and the urgency of the campaign? He's now 22 points behind Donald Trump on handling the economy, when we have an economy that's gangbusters, and that's not what he inherited from Donald Trump. On our new poll, concerned about age, 76% of those polled are concerned about Joe Biden's age. Only 61% concerned about Donald Trump's age, and he's only, a few years younger than.
They're in the same category. Yeah.
On the immigration, it's another, huge gap. What does he have to do to gear up this campaign?
Well, people have to understand what's on the ballot. When Joe Biden and Donald Trump, if that's what it turns into, are on the ballot, they have to understand what it means to their kitchen table. Donald Trump has said Obamacare sucks. Now, it has provide health care. It doesn't suck. It provides health insurance and care for tens of millions of people who didn't have it, and for over 150 million people who might have a pre-existing medical condition. He takes pride in overriding a woman, negating a woman's right to choose. Proud of the justices on the court that took away that right of privacy and that violation of precedent of the court. We talk about gun violence prevention, you talk about climate, you talk about all that. That is on the ballot. But let's go to people's kitchen table. The cost of health care is an economic as well as a financial, as well as a health issue. He is now trying to reverse the reduction in prescription drugs. We went from $600 a month for insulin for seniors who are on insulin, $500 or $600 a month, to $35 a month. Their plan is to reverse that. So again, what does it mean to you? Actually, Joe Biden at his age is he has a big vision for our country. He brings the wisdom, the knowledge, the judgment of age, as well as experience. He knows how to get things done. He's a legislator, not a person to hold things up. And he has a big heart of empathy for the American people. And that is why we're all so excited about his presidency and what he accomplished and what remains to be done. Elections are not about, I deserve it because I did this. People don't want to hear about that. They want to know what you're going to do next. And his agenda going forward, proving that he can get the job done, as opposed to the people who don't even know how to count votes.
You think he can overcome these deficits?
Absolutely. He will be. He and Kamala Harris will be reelected. Chuck Schumer, I feel pretty confident about the Senate, and we will win the House. Remember this, in the 2022 election, he said we were going to lose by, the polls and the pundits said we were going to lose by 30 or 40 seats. And we knew that it wasn't going to happen. We could see on the ground what was happening with a woman's right to choose. As they said, she's going to have to apologize for her message of gun violence protection, women's right to choose, climate, and democracy. We were 5 votes short. 5, not 30, not 40. So I'm not concerned. I'm about mobilizing on the ground, just own the ground to get out your vote with a message of the future. And again, having the resources, the money to get the job done. Just win, baby. That's my motto. We don't agonize about all this. We organize to win.
So say it, the Speaker Emerita. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.